tell me that billions, yes, billions with a B, were stolen from American taxpayers, funneled through fraudulent nonprofits, wired overseas, and then allegedly ended up in the hands of Al-Shabaab and the girly man soy boy, Governor Minnesota Tim Walz. He wants to talk about somebody's feelings. Don't nobody give a darn about your feelings, sir. Heck to the gnaw. This foolishness has got to stop, and President Trump is shutting all of this all the way down. Let's get into this. Grace and peace, you guys. Welcome back to Unshakable with April Chapman, where we discuss all things social, cultural, political, and theological from a biblical perspective. I am your host, April Chapman, and welcome to today's show. You guys, we have got to start dragging some of this foolishness into the daylight. There's this insane story. Actually, this is, in my opinion, one of the most insane, corrupt, reckless, and dangerous fraud scandals that this country has ever seen. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to deal with it biblically, factually, and with the full force of truth that these leftist custodians of chaos in the Democrat Party, they try so hard to suppress. So take a look at this clip.
Massive fraud scheme uncovered in Minnesota found money intended for social services has been allegedly siphoned indirectly into the pockets of the Somali terrorist group Al-Shabaab. Somali immigrants in Minnesota have reportedly been abusing systems meant to help the most unfortunate among us, including the latest federally funded autism services. The autism fraud scheme reportedly amassed $14 million through Medicare claims for services that were never provided, involving kids who never had autism. And the Somali immigrants behind this web of schemes have allegedly stolen billions from taxpayers, much of the money going back to the Somali government, where it would then end up in the hands of terrorists. Manhattan Institute investigative reporter Ryan Thorpe was one of the first exposing the schemes for their ties to terrorism. With us now, Ryan, a line from your story stuck out. The largest funder of Al-Shabaab is the Minnesota taxpayer, and you cite an unnamed source for that. What is the evidence that all of this money that was taken and the billions upon billions of increased funding in Minnesota for social services ended up in Somalia?
Well, billions of dollars of government welfare money is missing in the state of Minnesota.
How do we define missing?
Well, the fraud is so bad that the U.S. Attorney's Office has come out and indicated that they believe their entire government programs, where the fraudulent claims outstrip the legitimate ones. There are cases where indictments have come down or guilty pleas are already in to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars that were fraudulently obtained, filing false claims alongside doctored paperwork. And the indictments are continuing to come. And the U.S. Attorney's Office has made very clear that this is a network of fraud schemes stacked upon fraud schemes, and that while the true dollar figure in terms of stolen funds at this point isn't quite clear, it's safe to say that we're talking about billions of dollars. Okay.
It's pretty wild, some of the things that you lay out, including one group called Feeding the Future, that went from getting $3.4 million in 2019 to $200 million 2 years later. They grew faster than NVIDIA. How did nobody see that? Or is it that people and the government and those who are supposed to be the watchdogs, like Tim Walz, like Keith Ellison, the Attorney General, there just weren't looking?
I think it's safe to say that there was a real unwillingness or inability among Democratic state officials in Minnesota to recognize some pretty obvious alarm bells here. All across these programs, claims were skyrocketing, absolutely spiraling out of control over a short period of time. And the reality is that the Somali community, which is where these large-scale fraud rings have been concentrated within this population in the state, it is a sizable voting bloc. It is a voting bloc you have to win if you're going to win political office in Minneapolis. And so I think that was likely a incentive here that made some people not want to look too closely at what's been going on.
Okay, so let me paint the picture for you guys. Minnesota, which is run entirely by Democrats, they have allowed this sprawling, multi-layered, multinational fraud scheme operated by certain Somali nonprofits. Now, you guys may remember last week I did a video on the Islamic transformation of America, and how the Democrat Party is open season for so much of this infiltration for these anti-American worldviews and how it enters in the country. I believe that the influx of Somali immigrants into the country is just part of a multi foreign national scheme. Now, as it relates to what happened in Minnesota, these weren't some little slip ups. This wasn't like, oh, there was a clerical mistake. This wasn't some auntie who was overbilling for school lunches. No, that is not what happened. We're talking about fake autism clinics, fake elder care, fake disability services, feeding the future, all of these programs exploding from $3 million to $200 million in 2 years. These people went as far as to stage paperwork. They had make-believe non-existent clients and government benefits. All of this was just a veneer. It was all fake. None of these things ever existed. And where did the money go? The money went right back to the country of Somalia, straight into the pockets of people who are connected to or funding Al-Shabaab, which is an Islamic terrorist group. Let's repeat this slowly for the Democrats in the back, because you know they're hard of hearing. American welfare dollars, my money, your money, all of American taxpayer money went to Somali nonprofits, stolen, wired overseas, and funneled straight into terrorist organizations. And y'all, this mess happened on Governor Tim Walz's watch. But instead of taking responsibility, accepting some level of accountability, because you know accountability is like kryptonite to the leftists, this man pulls out the Democrat emergency escape kit. Well, you know, this is xenophobic, right? Like he starts crying racism. He starts talking about how Trump is just mean. And then he has the nerve to blame Republicans for not supervising his state. You cannot make this up. What in the gaslighting are we about to watch? Take a look at this clip.
I do want to start with the tragic shooting of the two National Guard service members. In the aftermath of the shooting, as you know, President Trump has responded by vowing to crack down on refugees, including from countries beyond Afghanistan, specifically targeting the Somali community in your home state. He also described you using a slur widely regarded as derogatory toward people with intellectual disabilities. I want to read for you what he said, Governor, and get your reaction on the other side. He said, hundreds of thousands of refugees from Somalia are completely taking over the once great state of Minnesota. Somalian gangs are roving the streets looking for prey as our wonderful people stay locked in their apartments and houses, hoping against hope they'll be left alone. The seriously blank governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, does nothing, either through fear, incompetence, or both. What is your response to President Trump, Governor?
Look, Donald Trump insulting me is a badge of honor for me, but I think we all know, as both as an educator for a couple decades and as a parent, using that term is just so damaging. It's hurtful. We have fought 3 decades to get this out of our schools. Kids know better than to use it. But look, this is what Donald Trump has done. He's normalized this type of hateful behavior and this type of language. And mainly, look, at first, I think it's just because he's not a good human being. But secondly, to distract from his incompetency. We know we just came through a Thanksgiving where prices are up. We know people are concerned about heating their homes as we're experiencing blizzards out here at the same time he's cutting those programs. So, look, we cannot allow this to be normalized. The people who, Trump is, like this is language police, you guys are woke. many times it's just about being decent to people and making them feel included. You can use that word, sure, you can use that language, but you shouldn't. And that's something that Donald Trump fails to realize. But again, Kristen, this is cruelness, this is meanness, it's aimed at a broader community. And as far as demonizing our Somali community, maybe he could help us on some things. Demonizing an entire community, folks who are in the professions, educators, artists, doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, they bring the diversity and the energy to a place like Minnesota. And for him to just randomly decide to do this, it makes no sense. Do your job, get the criminals out, secure our border, but do it with dignity and respect to the American tradition of respecting immigrants and refugees as a beacon of hope.
Well, speaking of the Somali community, President Trump is targeting them and your state in part. He's citing fraud as the reason for his crackdown. Dozens of people of East African descent have been charged, convicted, and sentenced for stealing more than $1 billion in taxpayer money from government programs during COVID. As you know, Governor, that is more than Minnesota spends each year to run its Department of Corrections. So I want to give you a chance to respond to this. Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals. Those people are going to jail. We're doing everything we can. But to demonize an entire community on the actions of a few, it's lazy. And as you heard Senator Kelly say, this president has cut a lot of inspector generals. He's cut programs that could help us tackle this on. So we'll take it on. We'll put folks in jail. I don't care what your nationality is. I don't care what your religion is, your color. If you're committing crimes, these are programs that were meant to serve students with autism, to housing, and to making sure people had enough to eat. There's a reason Minnesota ranks as the top. Lowest childhood poverty, best place for children to live. People are taking advantage of that, they're going to prison. That is totally disconnected with demonizing an entire group of people who came here fleeing civil war and created a vibrant community that makes Minnesota and this country better. But that's Donald Trump. Deflect, demonize, come up with no solutions. He's not going to help fix anything on fraud. My God, there's a big difference between fraud and corruption is something he knows about.
So Governor Walz goes on NBC, and suddenly this man becomes a kindergarten counselor. You know, the President Trump, the orange man bad, used really hurtful language. I'm like, wait a minute. People are out here shipping billions of dollars to terrorist groups. And a whole grown man, a governor of a state, Tim Sugar Walz, this man wants to discuss tone and hurt feelings. We literally heard him say, we can't demonize an entire community. First of all, nobody said an entire community. We said the people committing the fraud is the problem and they need to go. But Democrats love to hide behind identity groups. This is why identity politics is so harmful, because identity groups, all they do is double as voting blocks and political shields. And let's just be real. Tim Walz is not protecting the Somali community because he just cares about them so much. No, this man is protecting the Democrat money laundering system. He knows that we know how it works now. First, the Democrats, they pump taxpayer money into NGOs, community nonprofits. Then those nonprofits, they serve the community by not serving the community. Then the nonprofits, they donate money back to Democrats, and then you just rinse and repeat. The entire cycle just continues. It is literally the Jerome Crow plantation system. This is modern day political subjugation. All of it is wrapped up and wrapped and hidden behind a multicultural veneer of window dressing. Now, here is what Tim Walz doesn't want you to know. There are whistleblowers on the inside of Minnesota's own agencies who have gone on record to say that Governor Walz ignored the fraudulent reports. People filed reports alerting the state as to what was going on. Walz ended up, instead of cracking down and doing something about the fraud, this Negro, he's not a Negro, but I kind of just use that term real flippantly. Tim Walz retaliated against the employees who reported the fraud. Then he dismantled the oversight offices, and then he used political pressure to stop investigations. This man has been protecting people because he claims he didn't want to appear discriminatory. But let me translate. This is what he's really saying. This man let terrorists get the bag because he didn't want Twitter to call him racist. Is that what you want us to believe, Tim Walz? Yeah, nobody's buying that. Y'all, this is the Democrat Party's new motto. It's better for Al-Shabaab to get paid than for our diversity narrative to get bruised. I told you these people have a contempt and a hatred for America. They hate this country. Even the New York Times, the what I would call one of the lone representatives of the high priest of hypocrisy on the left, even the New York Times had to admit that Tim Walz oversaw the largest welfare fraud in Minnesota history. And I'm just curious to know, when is he gonna get drugged in front of Congress in some sort of congressional hearing to answer for this? Donald Trump, God bless the man, has gone on record to say, listen, if you commit fraud, you should be deported. And him saying that, suddenly Democrats are crying like he announced that he was about to start a whole nationwide purge of everybody. Let's be clear. The government has a specific job and a role. According to Romans 13, the government's job is to punish evildoers, the lawbreakers. Evil includes fraud, theft, corruption, funding terrorism. That's just to name a few. If you commit fraud that endangers this country, you exploit vulnerable children and the elderly, you steal our tax dollars to wire it to terrorists, you gotta go. Plain and simple. Get the stepping. It is legal. It is biblical. It is not xenophobic. This is about national security. That's it. Now, this is something that Democrat leadership, when you examine it at its core, this is bigger than Minnesota. This is reflective of what happens when an entire party worships multiculturalism over morality. They are always, the intersectionality boxes and the identity politics run so deep that they don't even realize that it's causing them to implode from the inside out. This party prefers the optics over law and order. They will idolize refugees, but then criminalize us, the taxpayer. They will spend so much time protecting the feelings of the criminals over the safety of us, the citizens. We are the Americans. You guys, the left views America. Unfortunately, they don't view us as a nation that should be defended. They look at us as a piñata to break open for their political gain, and it's about time that it stops. The Democrat Party are no longer leaders. They are deacons of dependency running a whole welfare cartel, and these disciples of darkness are always preaching inclusion, but all they do is practice corruption, and now it's being exposed. These are the ones who guard the plantation of government dependency, making sure that they solicit and recruit new electoral serfs, such as the illegal immigrant, to come here so that they can be their new slave class and then use our money to take care of them and then to woo them for votes. I am reminded how the Bible says that a false balance is an abomination to the Lord. There's another verse that says the wicked accepts a bribe in secret to pervert the ways of justice. Y'all, nothing about fraud is compassionate. I don't care. The ends do not justify the means. Corruption is not a form of diversity. When you are being deceptive and you are stealing our money, there's no way that you can turn it around and call it justice. If you're enabling fraud because you fear being called racist, you're a coward and you're weak. That's why I call him Jellyback Soy Boy, Sugar Walls, Tim Walz. Because God does not, listen, you can't be in leadership if you are a coward. You just can't. You have no business leading anybody. We can't trust you. Because if Democrats want to protect criminals, fine. But over here, for American First Patriots, we want justice. We're going to stand firm with courage, calling out this foolishness, because we refuse to live in a country where terrorists get wire transfers while American children get crumbs. That is unacceptable. If you commit fraud, you should be prosecuted. You should be thrown in jail with the key thrown away. And yes, if you're not a citizen, you got to go back. You should be deported. I'm sorry, I don't care. Our nation cannot be used as a fraudulent foreign network. Period. The end. But I am curious to know, what do you guys think? Should we move full steam ahead with deporting these foreign nationals and all of these immigrants who've been siphoning our tax dollars and sending them back to their country of origin to cause harm toward us? Or are you of the opinion that, well, this is just inhumane, they should be allowed to stay? I mean, I know the money is going to a terrorist organization and somehow we might get another 9/11 2.0, but it's just not fair to send them back. If that's you, I definitely want to hear from you. But leave me a comment down in the description box below, you guys. Until next time, stand firm, stay bold, and above all else, stay unshakable. Grace and peace.